have three students from Longfellow Middle School to lead the Pledge of Allegiance. Brianna Dye is an 8th grade student at Longfellow Middle School. She is the daughter of Greg Dye and has a sibling, Christian, Lexus, and Gianna. Diamond Hackler, an 8th grade student at Longfellow Middle School, is the daughter of Anna Arizari and has two siblings, Brittany and Michael. Xavier Cruz is also an 8th grade student at Longfellow Middle School. He is the son of Xavier Cruz and has one sibling, Israel. All three students are members of the Longfellow Middle School Bully Busters Bully Club. At this time, we'll have the students perform the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Bully Busters is an anti-bullying prevention group at Longfellow Middle School. We have Ms. Ollie, Ms. Roll, program facilitators here today to provide support for the program in the audience. In addition, Diamond and Xavier are members of the Urban League Leadership Group. After the pledge, right now we have the students will perform a brief statement pertaining to bullying.
Hi, my name is Brianna. We have 20 to 25 kids in our school that came up and wanted to do something about bullying. We're called the Bully Busters. In October, we sponsored Red Ribbon Week, Bullying Prevention Week. We made posters and put them up around the school. We did news announcements, bullying facts, and who to tell.
Hi, my name is Diamond, and I am an 8th grade student at Longfellow Middle. I am here to talk about Red Ribbon Week. We made red ribbons for all the students, and we also had an assembly with Officer Kuzinar. We had a Spirit Week where we had made all the students wear different colored shirts.
Hi, my name is Xavier Cruz. I'm a student of Longfellow Middle School, 8th grade. We've been, at the beginning of December, we were having a canned food drive for the Salvation Army. And we put posters to tell people to bring in cans. We collected about 1,400 cans for the Salvation Army. Right now, my group and I, called the Bully Busters, are working on a bullying video. The video will show examples of people being bullied in school and what people should do when they see it. And it will be broadcast on our school news. And there are other groups working on videos in different types of bullying and what they should do when they see it.
I would like for the parents of our students to please stand. Thank you for your support. I'd like to thank you for your support for Lorain City Schools and having great children. Thank you. I would like to present the students with a certificate of appreciation as well. Thank you very much for all your help. I'd like to now turn it back over to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hall. At this time, I'd like a motion to open up or make nominations for the office of president.
I'd like to nominate Tim Williams.
Second. Point of order, nominations do not require a second. But thank you anyway.
Thanks.
It's okay.
Are there any other nominations?
I move the nominations for president be closed.
Support.
Roll call for closing nominations.
So Mr. Williams has been nominated by Mr. Demakian, and Mr. Smith made the motion to close, and Mr. Fell is second, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Mr. Demakian.
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes?
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Sure.
Just don't bring me books anymore, and I won't do that.
And at this stage, do I have to formally accept and then the vote, or do we just
You
vote?
need to be sworn in.
Okay. Okay.
Nomination
For president.
declaration of the president of the board of elections.
So we're ready to...
Yeah, it's over. You've been elected. I believe. Somebody has to administer the oath to Mr. Williams. Do you have that with you, Mr. Weber?
I have a little hard time hearing you up here today. I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
Yeah, okay.
Do it separately, one at a time.
The Constitution of the State of Ohio, and will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as board president of the Board of Education, Lorain City School District, Lorain, Ohio County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office until your successor is elected and qualified. Thank you, sir. Congratulations.
Thank you, gentlemen. And now, I guess we need to take a motion for open nominations for vice president.
Motion for
Nomination of vice president.
I'd like to nominate Mitchell Fowles for vice president.
Move that the nominations for vice president be closed.
Motion for vice presidential nominations to be closed. Roll call, please.
And you need a second for that. Second for the closure?
I'll second, yes.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
No, we're voting for the closure, not the office yet. Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Now we need a vote for the vice president.
I think so.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
For Mr. Fallis, right? Yeah. Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis is the vice president. Okay.
You got it. Where? I know, that's how it used to be. Well, let's go ahead. Tell him.
Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as Vice President of the Board of Education of Lorain City School District, Lorain County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified? Congratulations, sir.
At this time in the agenda order, we will fix the day, time, and place of the board meeting. We've had some discussion about this, and so we will entertain a little bit of discussion. We are looking at, in terms of, we've talked to the superintendent, and based on the scheduling and different activities that go on throughout the week, the preference is that our meetings be held on Mondays at 6:30 p.m. here. That would be the second and fourth Monday of each month. Is there anything? Seriously, tell me if there's.
Mondays are actually bad. I teach a class Monday evenings.
Okay.
Mr. Tony, you remember when we both came on the board, we wanted to avoid a conflict with city council. which was the main reason we moved it from Monday, because it had been. So I have no objection to any night, but.
All right, you teach a class. Well, that's a kind of a standing obligation. Mr. Tucker, is there any other preference of the other days? Less of evils?
You're going to run into conflicts whenever you do it. Okay. Monday has less conflicts school-wise than any other day, but whatever day you pick, you're going to have conflicts. You've done Thursday and Wednesday, and you just deal with them.
Anybody have a conflict with Wednesday?
You're going to have conflicts whatever day you pick, whether it's Wednesday or Thursday. There's school activities, and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are the big days for school activities.
I think Wednesday's better.
Well, we had it for the first 4 years or so that Tony DeMacchia and I were on the board on Wednesdays. And then there seemed to be a conflict. This past year is the first year it moved to Thursday.
Okay,
And there seemed to be more conflicts with Thursday, even though we thought it was going to be less.
I agree.
So is there any opposition to Wednesday? Is that fit? That works?
No opposition to Wednesday for me.
Okay, so then Wednesday, the second and fourth Wednesday, is that agreeable to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
So I would like someone to maybe bring them
Set the time, too.
6:30 p.m. here at Frank Jacinto,
Well, what we did.
unless otherwise.
Yeah, either some way you have to build in, and what we did last year was to just, when we set the date
And the time.
and the time, and the meeting would be announced, the place.
So I guess the formal motion would be to establish the date and the time of the meeting to be the second and fourth Monday at 6:30 p.m.
Wednesday.
Second and fourth Wednesday
Motion.
at 6:30 p.m.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. DeMacchia.
Yes.
Mr. Fallis.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Second and fourth Wednesday, 6:30 Jacinto.
Next, we have tape and televised regular board meetings. We will continue as with the protocol that we presently have. No changes to the format. May we have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Mr. Fallis.
Yes.
Mr. DeMacchia.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes. As it relates to order of business and procedure, i.e. agenda, there was some discussion perhaps of, and this came up again last year, and since it was brought up in our pre-agenda meeting, I will allow some more discussion on it if necessary. There was a suggestion to not have 2 hearings of the public. And I know that there are some, I know Mr. Smith is not in favor of that. We had a lot of discussion about that, but again, it was brought to my attention, so I thought it would be reasonable to present it. Is there any?
I just think that having 2 hearings in the public is just repetitive because most people only get up for 1 hearing. You know, they're either going to wait or they're going to get up for the first one. And a lot of times we don't have anybody stepping up for one or the other. So why don't we just have 1 hearing in the public, hold it the place of the second hearing in the public, and appease everybody. If they want to wait till after our meeting to ask questions or make comments about the things that we discussed in our meeting, then that would be the appropriate time to do that.
Mr. Fallis, Mr. Sturgill? Just so you know, by law, there is no requirement at all of a public hearing. We have extended that, and we think it's a good thing. It's given us an opportunity. There's one presently at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting. Somewhat redundant, but again,
Other than it takes more time. I mean, I don't.
Excuse me. Can we do something with this audio? Even if we turn it down a little bit, it's just ringing and we can't hear ourselves.
Yeah. I think we should just move everybody up front and have a round table. We wouldn't have to have audio. I don't mind the 2 hearings of the public. if we go to one, maybe I would say maybe adjust the time limit, because sometimes there's just 3 minutes is just not enough time for people to get their point across. But I guess I'm in favor of it. We haven't really had any problem with it. It's just, I don't see why to change it. It seemed to work.
If I may, Mr. President. School board policy sets aside 30 minutes at each meeting for the hearing of the public. It does not establish how many times on the agenda it has to appear. But, and it does allow by a majority vote of the board, that if the 30 minutes have been used up in the first hearing of the public, then by policy there would be no second hearing of the public. But the board can, by a majority vote, extend. Remember, the policy is 3 minutes per person, 30 minutes per meeting. And I've been in this auditorium, and some of you may have as well, when there were no empty seats, and there were 40 people lined up for the microphone, which was back in 2006 or 7. Bill, you were here.
Yeah.
When they were starting to cut programs, and I tell you what, it changed the board's mind. Neither board, Bill or I, were on the board, but I think they heard. And it's really as much for us to hear as it is for them to speak. So a lot of times something will happen during the meeting, and someone will think of something they weren't even going to speak of. On the other hand, if we only go to the second hearing, someone who is here just to speak has to sit through the entire meeting before they can speak. So I have no problem with 2. I thought it was wrong to change it to 1 when we did, but I'm not going to, I think my motion would be to adopt an agenda, the same agenda that we used last year for this year, which doesn't change anything.
Please, Mr. Fallis.
I have a comment. I'm okay with the order that is presently established that we used last year, but if we would consider using 1 hearing of the public, I think it would be appropriate to have the hearing, eliminate the second hearing of the public in the order that it currently is, because I would certainly like to hear from the public before I voted on the issue. And so I think hearing from the public after we voted or deliberated doesn't really give the public an opportunity to voice their opinion or give some insight on some of the issues that we might be deliberating and voting on. So I'm just trying to give, I guess if we do decide to vote on just 1 hearing of the public, I would recommend that the hearing would be, the one that would be eliminated would be in the second one in our order and not the first one. But I would certainly be in favor of keeping the process the way it is right now. Thank you.
Well, my math is pretty decent.
Really?
And
better than your sight?
You got to count to 2 numbers around here. You got to count to 5 and count to 3. And by my deduction, I think I've counted to 3. And we need to count no more. So I guess we can have a motion to have the agenda as is with no changes.
So move.
Second.
No more discussion? Roll call, please.
Smith. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
And just to build on Mr. Fallis has been on City Council. How many times on the City Council agenda is there a hearing of the public?
There is no time on City Council agenda of the hearing of the public. But
backing up with
City
Mr.
Council does, at their committee meeting levels, allow the public to speak quite at length
and we do
upon
too.
those deliberations. That's a little different format.
Yeah, we're the only, as John Pavic used to say back when I was on the board in 1987, we're the only political body in town people can come and talk to during a meeting. So that's what we're going to do. Good.
Okay. No need for any more comments because it's already been done.
Well, you know, and I guess I'd just like to make a comment.
talked about being available to the public, but I think our personal information, our contact information is on the Lorain School Board webpage. So, I mean, the public is certainly welcome to contact us. Our phone number's in the book. So, I mean, if there's any issues that you want to talk over, we're certainly open to having some dialogue and hearing things from your perspective. So I just thought this might be the appropriate time to reach out and have a public service announcement on behalf of the Lorain City School Board. Thank you very much.
Well, then I guess I would have one final comment, because I think there needs to be some understanding of why there are differences of opinion. Many perspectives are from this angle. This is a board meeting in view of the public. And the efficiency of that meeting is of the utmost importance. And actually, the hearing of the public is not the public hearing for the public, but the public hearing to the board. And what we've experienced oftentimes, especially when we have those 25 folks who want to speak, oftentimes they're not speaking to the board, but speaking to the public as a platform to then voice their opinions. That is not what the intent of the hearing of the public is. The hearing of the public is an opportunity for the public to address the board, not to grandstand or not to make announcements. And we have had this occur. The other thing that happens is oftentimes it's very important for the public to be able to hear what we discuss and then have a comment. When a person from the public comes and the meeting, the hearing of the public is first, that oftentimes means that their comments may have nothing to do with our meeting. And it's very important that the discussion needs to, I mean, especially when we're talking about what we're going to vote on, they don't know what we're going to vote on until they hear us discuss. So it's, and I can see both sides of it. Again, we will continue as we are, but I think there is valid perspectives from both sides as to why we should or shouldn't have two public hearings of the public. And I just want to make sure that people kind of understood some of the perspectives that different board members have.
And also, Mr. President, the school board policy also makes provisions for anyone who believes they have an issue that they wish to discuss that would be longer than 3 minutes, simply by calling the superintendent's office, I believe, and stating a request that they're going to want to have 20 minutes or 30 minutes or something like that. I see our gracious chair of our levy committee. You're still awake, right, Bambi? Oh, okay. What if they want to come and tell us something, or another group? That there's provisions in the board policy manual for that. And then I think it's the superintendent's office, Mr. Tucker, that would be called, because you work with the board president setting the agenda. So
Correct.
Moving forward, gentlemen, set board member compensation. Is there any? Isn't that already kind of defined? What is the present compensation?
125, meeting.
that's the maximum allowed by law.
Do we have a motion for someone to either change that or keep it as is?
Point of order, also, you cannot set compensation for a public official currently holding office. It would be the future. So one of the things that the law department at OSBA pointed out to me a number of years ago, if future boards, if we decide we want to, say, wanted to lower the compensation, we would have to do that sometime during this year. Because if we wait till January, it's too late, they're already on. So anybody who thinks we should relook at board compensation for future years, that has to be done. And it only applies to people coming on the board after that motion has been adopted.
Motion to approve the compensation as is.
Second.
Question. I guess I'd like to direct this to Treasurer Weber. I assume that the way this was written was for the current year, the compensation for the calendar year 2013. Now, Jim's kind of suggesting that it's not. It's for the calendar year 2014. I just like to get clarity on what time period we're voting on for this compensation for school board members.
Well, it would be going forward, because you guys didn't change it, the board didn't change it last year. We're still at 125 from last year. Going back, what Mr. Smith said, I think he's correct. If you changed it now, it would be the future board members coming in. But we're still at 125 per meeting for the board members right now. So in my opinion, we're voting for the future boards coming in.
So
Future new members of the board
And the
coming in.
only-
So that would be for the calendar year 2014, is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And so you understand, Mitch, what would happen is, let's say that we changed it. It would not affect you or any sitting board members. Whoever would be elected in November, they would have that new compensation. But your compensation would not change because you're already elected.
Okay.
Correct.
Based upon that information, I would like to make an amendment to this resolution before us to identify really what we're voting on. One is, I would recommend, I'm making the following motion, that we would remove the words not exceeding and insert the word of, a rate of $125 per meeting for, I would say, 4 meetings after December 31st, 2013. So we're identifying what time period we're covering, and that's open-ended, because then a year from now, the school board can adjust that. So I would say after the word attended, for meetings after December 31st, 2013.
It's
First-
automatically that.
Yes, first we have to be very careful when we're messing with language because the legal pieces of it. Also, there's another issue that could occur. A board member could resign. If the board member resigned and we change this right now, and that board member came on in 40 days, they would. So this is for this calendar year. It is not for.
No.
It's for the coming calendar year. It does not.
But if we raised it, which we can't,
So-
because the maximum per meeting by law is $125.
So I misunderstood
So
that.
let's
So
say
what we're
we-
voting
let-
on is for the calendar year 2013 then?
If you have to be in line with the code.
Okay.
When I was appointed to the board in 1987, the compensation changed in January of 1987. Even though I wasn't elected, I did not assume my position until after the change, so I was making more money than the others. They raised it. The state allowed them to raise it. It was $80 then. And I was making 80, and the other ones I think were making 60 or 50 because I came in after. So anyone sitting at this table tonight would be affected by any new compensation changes. But we are all.
And this is a 13-14 piece that we're doing. That's the present time that we are.
No, we're doing 2013. That's it. This is calendar year, not school year.
Okay, then based upon that information, I would propose that I change my amendment to, after the words attended, I would just say effective January 1st, 2013. So we get some timing here in terms of identifying when this compensation is effective for.
All right, there's a motion. I'm not in agreement, so let's just let the motion come forward. If it has a second, then we'll go. Is there a second for the motion?
It's an amendment. Did we vote? Did we vote on the compensation yet?
No, we're voting on the amendment change right now.
To keep it the same.
It's just call it to order because this was the discussion. There's a motion to approve the compensation as is. Is there a second for the motion?
Support.
Roll call.
Mr. Demakia,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Fallis,
Point of order, I had made a
There's a
motion.
motion on the floor. The vote is being taken now.
Was there a motion before I made my?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine, I didn't catch that, thank you very much.
Catch you, buddy.
All right,
We're gonna leave you hanging.
I am not in favor of the motion, so I vote nay.
you vote no, sir? Did you vote no? I'm sorry.
Yes, I vote no.
Okay. Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes. Now, I think if we're in order, if he wanted to make an amendment to the motion,
The motion's passed.
passed. Good. We have moved forward, gentlemen.
Where are we? I'm lost now. What year are we in? What's What's next?
We now need a resolution establishing service fund for 2013.
Motion to approve item 5.
For how much?
What is the amount?
I don't know.
The amount is $20,000. I'm not sure if you guys, if you go a little farther back in your packet, there's some detail behind that, and you'll see that information in there at $20,000.
It's also in the...
So what is the motion?
The motion is to approve
Motion
item 5 at the
To
amount
approve
of...
the service fund of sum of $20,000.
There you go, okay. Has that been seconded yet?
Is there a second?
Support.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes. Consider the appointment of legislative liaison for government, legislative, and student achievement. And I guess formally we have to select someone.
Who was last year? Tony,
Mr.
were
Mitch
you?
Fallis was last year,
Yes, that is correct.
Who was?
and Mitch.
He wasn't here last year. I mean, oh, yeah, you want to do it again?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll be glad to.
Would someone like to?
I make a motion Mitchell Fallis be our legislative liaison.
Second.
You're all right.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes. And consider payment of annual membership dues to OSBA, item number 7.
Make a motion to approve the payment for our annual membership dues not to exceed $9,000.
Support.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Just let me, if I may, under discussion,
Please.
just so the public knows, we saved by being members of the OSBA this past school year between $40,000 and $50,000, specifically in the search process. Because previous school boards and the superintendents before Mr. Tucker, $40,000, $50,000 was spent to outside agencies. And this year, was it around 10, Dale?
Even less than that, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we're moving forward with a strategic plan, again using the OSBA. And I tell you what, we get 10 times our money back in service. So, thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome. And roll call.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes. Consider payment of OSBA 2013 Legal Assistance Fund membership, item number 8.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Discussion?
Is there a cost to that, Mr. Weber?
Is there a cost? Yes, it's $250.
Okay, thank you.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes. Authorization, item 9, authorization for superintendent to act as representative for grants.
Motion to amend item number 9.
A second from somebody?
Should I give the amendment first?
What?
No need.
Oh,
Is there, did someone make a motion to
Is there a
adopt?
second?
I second the motion to adopt, to appoint the superintendent.
Thank
as our
you.
Grant reserve.
Any discussion?
Tim, I made a motion to amend, not to approve.
I can't hear what you're saying, sorry.
I said I made a motion to amend
Amend.
item number 9.
Well,
Okay.
who made the motion, and was the motion seconded to adopt item 9? Mr. Treasurer, Clerk,
I can't hear.
this is good.
What is your,
No, the point of order,
Point of
you
order.
can't amend a motion until a motion has been seconded.
do we have a second for the motion? Do we have a first for the motion?
I don't know.
Can
Who
we
made the
have a
motion?
first
Mr.
for-
Mr. Clerk.
I have not heard the motion being made yet to approve this one yet.
It's real simple. We need a motion for item 9.
Motion to authorize the superintendent to act as a representative for grants.
Point of order, I asked for amendment. I asked for a motion for amendment before my colleague
Yes,
here.
the motion for the amendment cannot come until after the amendment has been made. In other words, there's no motion yet.
Why don't we let Mr. Fallis make the motion? Then we don't have to amend anything, and we can vote it down or up. What is it that you'd like to amend, sir?
It's quite simply is I'd like to have item number 9 mirror item number 10, and to add the word private grant, so we authorize Mr. Tucker as the authorizing representative for private grants. So my motion is to remove the word "and" before the word "federal," put a comma after "federal," insert the word "and," insert the word "private," so it mirrors number 10. So we give him that authority.
Are we not on item 9?
Yes.
Well, then, what are we amending?
My motion for item number 9 is to remove the last "and" in the paragraph, put a comma after "federal," insert the word "and," insert the word "private," so it mirrors the verbiage of item number 10. So we're authorizing Mr. Tucker to be the authorized agent for private grants as well.
Okay.
Well, that's in the body of number 9.
One is to participate and one is to authorize. They are different. We are
Right.
authorizing, and in number 10, we are basically saying
Correct.
what he can look at.
Right.
So,
If you, I'm not sure if, does the board have the detail behind these items a little further in their packet? It has, because the words are there in item 9. It says, it's recommended the superintendent be appointed as the authorized representative and grants officer for all local, state, and federal grants for 2013. That's exactly what it says in the body of item 9.
yes.
Yes, I'm suggesting we add the word "private," because he could be operating and going after a private grant. So I want to give him the authority to do that as a board member.
In here.
Is there a second to the amendment?
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. We have a second.
It's to add the word federal, is that correct? Or private, rather.
Private.
So we want item 9, item 10 to mirror each other. Is that what that's what we're gonna do, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We have to vote on the amendment.
Vote on the amendment. Roll call, please.
Mr. Fallis.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes, I think.
We're all confused.
Mr.
So we put a comma in, well, never mind, just vote.
Yeah, we're gonna mirror 9 and 10 to be the same wording, exactly the same wording. That's what we're gonna do. That's what we're voting.
We're not on 10 yet.
Pardon?
We're not at 10.
That is correct.
Okay.
That was my motion, yes.
So you have 2 more board members.
Yes, Mr. Demakia
No.
and Mr. Williams.
You.
I abstain. I'm confused.
You can't abstain unless you give a reason. Oh, you're confused. Okay, that's allowed.
It's, gentlemen, before we move on, this wordsmithing is more confusing than clarity. We are not providing additional clarity. We are creating more confusion. This isn't new. It's not rocket science. Can we please, unless the language creates some significant problem, which I think, having been reviewed through legal counsel and the administration, can we try to just move forward?
Sure.
Well, I just have a difference of opinion, Mr. Smith, on that issue, is I think that we need to be very clear and distinct that we give the authority for private grants as well.
May we have a motion?
Well, then we would have to have a definition of what a private grant is.
Please, Mr. Fallis.
I mean, all due
Please.
respect, we've had our materials for the last 2 weeks. If there was something that we didn't agree with in these materials, I would appreciate if any of us had any questions about it, we would get it handled before we got to our public meeting so we can make sure the agenda is accurate and correct so we wouldn't have to go through this process. That's,
And that was the same recommendation that we've made throughout last year. We had this come up at our agenda meeting last year, and at best, it's embarrassing. It's not. So if we could, gentlemen, moving forward, may we have a motion to approve item 10?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we voted on the amendment, and we had 3 yeses, a no, and an abstain.
Okay, so then we need a motion to approve 9 as amended.
Correct, that's correct.
May we have a motion, please?
No, a vote.
We're ready for the vote?
Yes.
But was there a
Vote,
motion?
roll, then may we have
We
a vote,
couldn't
please?
amend it. We're on 9.
We're on 9.
We're on 9.
We amended 9.
Who's on first?
We amended 9, and the vote was to amend it. Now we're going to
Now we
vote
have to
on the
vote- Now we have to vote on the
amendment.
resolution. No, we voted on the amendment, 3-2.
We voted to
3-1
amend.
abstention, yes.
We voted to amend item 9. Now we have to vote on item 9.
Motion to approve item 9 as amended.
Thank you.
No. Yes, that's just, go call the.
May we have a motion to approve?
You don't need a motion.
We need
We're
a
ready to
second.
vote.
Jim, just sit there and do what you do. May we have a second, please?
For what?
Because we're getting ready to vote.
On what? We have a motion, it's been amended, now you vote on the motion as amended.
Motion to approve as amended.
Call the roll, Dale.
Who seconded?
Second, I'll second it, just
Okay.
so we can move on.
Okay. Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Motion to approve item 10.
Second.
I'm afraid to say discussion.
Call the question, sir.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Motion to approve item 11.
Yes, please.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes. Item number 12, consider appointment of legal counsel.
Motion to approve item number 12.
Support.
I have some comments.
Comments, please? Discussion?
I brought this up last year. I think we need to really begin looking in 2 ways that we can use the city law director, who is by law our attorney and cannot charge for his services. In a recent, very short conversation over some coffee with Mr. Riley, he indicated he'd like to help us. His words, not mine. Number 2, board policy, should we ever decide to follow it, sets the maximum compensation for legal counsel at $4,000 per month. And we haven't, I don't know if they ever, any boards ever, but that's, so my says, if we're going to do better than that, we need to change the policy. And number 3, it's been almost 5 years, if we're going to seek outside counsel, it's been almost 5 years since we asked for proposals from attorneys to serve as our counsel so that we could get service at the lowest possible price. Mr. Giardini was the only law firm, this law firm was the only law firm to respond back in 2008, and his was a competitive cost compared to what we were spending anyway. But I think due diligence would require us to relook at that and perhaps seek some proposals to see if we could further lower any outside counsel expense. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is called to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes. Item 13, consider authorization for investment of funds.
Motion to approve item 13.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes. Item 14, consider approval to request available monies.
Motion to Support.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Fowles?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes. Item 15, petty calf authorization.
Motion to approve item number 15.
Support.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Fowles?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes. Item 16, change fund authorization.
Motion to approve item 16.
Support.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Fowles?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes. Item number 17, agreement for payment of educational costs.
Motion to approve item 17, agreement for payment of educational cost.
Support.
Discussion?
That's for students placed outside the district. Okay, I think the law requires that anyway.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Fowles?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes. Item 18, reappointment of BIOC, Bond Issue Oversight Committee members.
So
Motion
moved.
to approve item 18.
Support.
Discussion?
Yes, do we know that all of the names appearing in the agenda have accepted, Mr. Have all of the people named, Mr. Tucker, have they accepted? That's what, Mr. Hawks?
Mr. Hawks says yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay, that's all.
He contacts those folks.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Fowles?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
President Williams, may I make a quick comment?
Please.
Relative to item 18, I just want to thank all the past and current members of the Bond Oversight Committee for their efforts and contributions to the Lorain City School District. Thank you.
Very good.
At this time, item 19 are committee appointments. And the following are my, through conversation, recommendations for the committees. Would it be appropriate to announce them before we further? Most of them are pretty standard. One of them is somewhat unique. The Athletic Committee, Mr. Tony Demakia and Mr. Bill Sturgill. The Facilities Committee / Bond Oversight Committee, we are going to do somewhat of an non-traditional appointment. We have 3 of us are up for re-election, and we are not sure exactly what the outcome of that will be. But there is a great, it's significantly important to maintain a certain continuity on that committee. And I discussed this with the administration as also with other board members. Mr. Smith also has expressed a desire to continue on that committee. He's been on that committee probably since its inception, and in respect for that, and able to observe his wish, I believe we can have our cake and eat it too. So that we have the continuity that we will need going forward, I've asked Mr. Demakia to be on that committee, and Mr. Smith and Mr. Sturgill. The law requires that only 2 folks can be at the meeting at one time, and we will observe that. It has nothing to do with the actual appointments, but we will make sure that there's no more than 2 folks at that meeting, and I think that will give us the integrity we need moving forward, and it'll allow the institutional memory that is presently there with Mr. Smith and the work that they've done to continue and make it more efficient in terms of how we move forward.
If I may,
Please.
someone needs to check school board policy regarding committee appointments, because school board policy says all committees of the board, okay, all committees of the board shall include the superintendent and or their designee, the president of the board, and 1 other board member. or the president can choose a designee. So all I'm saying is, if the meeting minutes reflect 3 people being appointed, they may be contrary to school board policy. I understand your method.
So what we will do is we will check that. If there's a problem, if we are in conflict with the policy, we will then retract our appointment. And well, we couldn't amend the policy until after, we'd have to reappoint again. So, but there's a protocol by which we can do that.
Well, why don't we include in, before I offer and get into a long debate and discussion on an amendment, could we amend the could you, we haven't even had a motion yet, so could you say that there would be 3 members and one would, at any one time, one would serve as an alternative or something like that?
Yes,
that's right. What you're really talking about, right?
Yes, we will define it as one alternative.
So if Tony or who, any 3 of us can't, and if all can, then we'll decide among ourselves who goes.
Yeah.
That's what your thought
exactly.
is? Okay.
Okay, so the language for that just indicate that there are 3 board members appointed, and in due season we will determine which is the primary and which are the alternate. Moving forward, the policy committee will consist of, the Business Advisory Council, Mr. Mitch Fallis and myself. The policy committee, Bill Sturgill and Tim Williams. Ohio Urban School Initiative, Tony Damachia.
If I may, you missed one.
I missed one?
Mm-hmm.
What did I miss?
You don't have the endowment committee.
Yeah, I've got that written down. It wasn't listed on our list, but I have it written here. It's not on the list.
Okay, well, you need to inform the public and who you're going to put on it, too. I'm sorry, sir.
And we will also, as I spoke with Mr. Tucker, be reinstituting the Fine Arts Committee. And that committee will have board representation from myself and Mr. Smith. Also in relation, so just for FYI, the policy committee, we've had some discussion among board members and among the administration. Presently, that committee falls under the domain of the board. We have 2 types of committees. We have board committees and superintendent committees, administrative committees. And there is a desire to move the policy committee under the domain of the superintendent. And I've discussed that with board members. And that allows us to have a bit more efficiency there. And there are some very sensitive issues, security and other things that fit there. Also, what we found, especially when we were reviewing our policies, as we're transitioning, gosh, 90% of the policies at least are in the student and in the administrative domain. Minimal is in the board domain, and it just makes better efficiency sense. I've also checked with a lot of other districts, and that seems to be a practice. I think, Mr. Tucker, that was a practice that you had prior at Sandusky, correct? And you are in favor of that?
Just so we understand that all committees are in the domain of the board.
Yes.
Only the board can
appoint,
create and pass.
Yes. It really has to do with how it administratively functions.
How you get to that, the committee, no committee has the power to take action anyway, only recommend, so.
Correct. All action still comes to the board for approval.
Correct.
And then another committee that is not listed on our sheet here, which is kind of probably the most unique committee participation that we have. It is the endowment committee. It is not under the authority of the school district. It works in conjunction with, but it's kind of it's an enigma. I guess is the best way to describe it. And Mr. Smith has been on that committee and will continue to be. That is a really wonderful thing. It provides some unique opportunities for students and teachers, and it is not funded. The revenue does not come from the school board, but from an endowment and the interest. And so that appointment is also, we're doing that. We're setting our board person to represent us there.
And that will be?
Pardon me?
Who will be the board person?
That's you.
Me.
Jim Smith.
Thank you.
Jim Smith.
Emre Kovac in Hungarian.
Mr. Williams, Mr. maybe I missed it, I hear you. For the Ohio Urban Schools Initiative, there was a delegate, was Mr. Damakia. Was there an alternate?
I did not. Is there anyone who would like to serve as alternate? Mr. Bill Sturgill.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Sturgill. Gentlemen, are those committee assignments acceptable?
Motion to approve item 19, committee appointments.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Okay, before I want to just get the people right, make sure I heard it, okay? So at the athletic committee is Mr. Damaki and Mr. Sturgill. The facilities committee bond issue oversight is Mr. Smith, Mr. Damaki, and Mr. Sturgill. We're looking into some wording on that. Make sure we get that right. The business advisory is Mr. Fowles, Mr. Williams. The policy committee, which will become a superintendent committee, is Mr. Sturgill, Mr. Williams. Ohio Urban Schools Initiative, Mr. Damaki, Mr. Sturgill. The Fine Arts is Mr. Williams, Mr. Smith. Endowment is Mr. Smith, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Roll call, Mr. Damaki,
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Mr. Fowles,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Yes. Authorization of superintendent to accept resignations.
Motion to approve item 20.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Damaki,
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Fowles,
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes. Authorization, item 21, authorization of superintendent to hire staff between board meetings.
Motion to approve item 21, authorizing the superintendent to hire staff between board meetings.
Support.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Fowles,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Mr. Damaki,
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn organizational meeting.
Support.
Roll call.
Mr. Damaki,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Mr. Fowles,
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes. Welcome to our regular board meeting. Roll call, please.
Mr. Damaki,
Yes.
Mr. Fowles,
Yes.
Mr.
Present.
Smith,
Here.
Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Here. I would like a motion to suspend the Pledge of Allegiance since we've already done that.
Motion to suspend.
Support.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Mr. Fowles,
Yes.
Mr. Damaki,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
and Mr. Smith.
Yes.
No recognition of visitors? I don't see. Moving forward, first hearing of the public. I guess we just skipped over that.
You scared them off.
May I have a motion to approve the signed minutes of the special meeting session held on December 6, 2012?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Support. Okay, never mind. Okay.
Did you get all that, Dale?
You gotta have fun.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Damaki,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill,
Yes.
Mr. Fowles,
Yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Yes. Is there any old business?
I don't know of any.
Report and recommendations of the treasurer.
Okay, I have 7 items on the agenda for this evening. Item 1 is the standard this time of year tax budget, which is first pass at next year's budget, which starts July 1st, 2013. Item 2 is the rates and amounts is determined by the Lorain County auditors for calendar year 2013. Item 3 is the November 2012 financial reports. Item 4 are purchase orders requiring board approval. Item 5 is authorization to accept 457 IRS Code 457 investment plans by the district, which we've been doing for a while. Item 6 is the board member capital conference expense approval. And item 7, you can see we have a number of donations on the dockets for this evening. I could take item 1 separately, if we could.
Motion to approve item 1.
Support.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Item 2 separately, please.
Motion to approve item 2.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
I could take items 3 through 7.
Motion to approve items 3 through 7.
Support.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Whoop, whoa, don't be so fast.
Oh.
Yeah.
I just want to, I think it's just wonderful to see what the community does in areas they do not have to do. And doing some things for our kids. The Nordson Corporation doing with the robotics and with the strategic plan and mittens and gloves and all of these things. It just speaks well of the heart of Lorain, Ohio, and I know the kids appreciate that. Okay, I'm ready now.
Roll call, please.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed who said the motion in second.
That would be me.
And second was?
Mr. Sturgill seconded.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay, Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams? That was items 3 through 7.
Yes.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Report and recommendations of the superintendent. Mr. Tucker.
Under Personnel Matters, A, Item 1, consider approval of discontinuances. We have 1 administrative staff, 2 certified staff, and 3 support staff as listed. Please note that we are not replacing the administrative staff. That's part of the beginning of the reductions. Item 2, consider of new appointments. We have item 1 is administrative staff substitutes, which we're always looking for. The certified staff is some additional substitute teachers. Approval of new appointments, support staff. You can see their substitutes, and the other ones, the personal attendants, and the our new students that moved into the district that require those, and the parapros are folks that of positions people have been into it we are replacing. Item 3, approval of contractual status. We are recalling these teachers. These are our kindergarten teachers, which will begin, thank God, January 22nd. Our little ones are going to be here all day with us. As you notice, we have been able to put one of those on some title funds, and the St. Peter's teacher is also on a title fund. Item 4, consider approval of leave of absences as listed. Number 5, approval of supplemental contracts. These are for winter as listed. And item 6 is approval of job descriptions for some operations, things that we're modernizing and changing some things around. So I ask for items A, personnel approval, items 1 through 5.
Motion to approve.
1 through 5 or 6, Mr. Tucker?
Was it 6?
Through 6 also?
1 through 6.
I'm sorry, 1 through 6. My mistake, sorry.
1 through 6. Motion to approve items 1 through 6.
Support.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Fallis?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes, sir.
Under Operation Matters B, item 7, approval of an agreement with Positive Education Program. This is they're going to provide professional development for some of our teachers for next week. I guess, yeah, it is next week. Item 8, consider of approval of an agreement to provide CPR and defibrillator training for our PE teachers. This is a required training. Item 9, approval of an agreement to provide interpretation services for students attending Lorain High School. These are some students that have moved in. Item 10, considering entering into a contract with Apple for services delivered. We purchased the iPads for our 5th and 6th graders. This is now going to be training our teachers, and this is a title expenditure. Item 11, approval of agreement with OSBA to provide strategic planning services for 2012-13. Their cost to do that over a period of time is $8,000, and I would like to thank the Nordson Corporation Foundation, because they are supporting that to the tune of $7,500, and I'll be sending a letter to them tomorrow, thanking them for that after we ask for them to assist with that. And item 12, consider approval of adoption of resolution for School Board Recognition Month. And I have nice little certificates for all of you for being good board members and doing that. And would you like me to read this?
I want to know if they have president's pictures on them.
No.
Then you don't have to.
Okay. So I ask for approval of Operation Matters B, items 7 through 12.
Motion to approve items 7 through 12.
Second?
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Demakia?
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill?
Yes.
Mr. Fels?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Any new business, gentlemen? Guess one item that's semi-new business, and it's a request to, it will take place at a work session during our first meeting in February. We'll take a little bit of time during the work session at the end of the meeting to go over some committee pieces. We would like to have committee assignments pretty much established as far as populating those committees, and also we would like, through discussion, to set meeting times for the committees. For example, if it's going to meet quarterly, monthly, twice a year. That way, as we try to get folks to come on a committee, it's difficult when you ask someone to be on a committee and they ask you when does it meet, and you say, oh, I don't know. So we just want to provide a little bit of clarity around that and make sure that, I think also we want to review, making sure, I think everybody who was on the Bond Oversight Committee had agreed to be back on it again, making sure that's populated. Also, Superintendent Tucker will be coming forward with some of his recommendations as it relates to the Strategic Planning Committee, and at least being able to give us a little bit of clarity in terms of how that's going to actually roll out. We won't have all the details, but we'll have some clarity so that board members have a good understanding of that moving forward. Any other new business? Committee reports, requests from board members. It's been a pretty, the holiday season, no committee meetings. Nothing from the facilities or anything?
Well, there haven't been no meetings. I think, Ms. Tansey, am I correct that at the next board meeting you will have the results of this year's grant process? And that's going to be really exciting, folks. Some of these grants are going to be just, because of the generosity, again, of the community. And this is not general fund, and it is not board controlled. But we're pretty close, Rachel, are we not, to about 90 grand? And that's money that is going to let kids go to, I think there's a Washington trip in there. There's a number of museum trips. There's fine arts and all sorts of things that, because one of the rules of the endowment fund, which is, Rachel does a wonderful job locally and it's a lot of work. I know, because I did it, and that was all I had to do, and you have other jobs. But this is all under the umbrella of the Lorain County Community Foundation. And it allows us to do all sorts of things for our children and one of the rules is you cannot use endowment funds to replace general fund money. The legal term or whatever is supplant, but it just means replace. So we can't use it to pay teachers or salaries or other general fund, but it allows us to buy special items for the kids. It allows us, there's some special, I don't know, they're iPads or what they are for special needs kids, and there's we're gonna do that at the next meeting, and I would hope the media would pick up on that, because we are the oldest school endowment fund to have partnered with a community foundation in the United States. We were first in the 80s, and it's just another indication as the true heart of Lorain, Ohio. So that's coming next time. That's all I have, sir.
Any other comments, reports from other board members? We'll send a shout out to Bambi.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, lady. I guess the second hearing of the public. Any takers?
There's our young man.
Please simply state your name and address.
Hello, everyone. Hello, board. My name is Denzel Palmer. I'm a sophomore at Ashland University, and I live in South Lorain. I just wanted to thank the board for allowing me and my colleague, Aaron Seja, who was in attendance, to be a part of the Lorain City Schools Superintendent Search Committee, which brought us Tom Tucker. And I want to thank the board and Tom Tucker and the public for passing the school levy. And I'm looking forward to the great things that Lorain City Schools are coming up with. So thank you.
Mr. Palmer, please sign in over there on that paper. Thank you.
Any others? Thank you. The next board meeting will take place on Wednesday, January 23rd, 6:30 p.m. right here.
You got it right. That's right.
And I need a motion for adjournment.
I think this is the second one.
Motion to adjourn.
We already had that.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Fallis.
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Demakia.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
This has been a production of Lorain City Schools TV 20 WLCS.
To purchase a high-quality copy of the program you just viewed, please call Lorain City Schools Television at 282-8400.